Hi. I think always a little difficult to be the speaker just before lunch, right? But I believe this is a very important topic because when somebody asked a question that how many of you are there who are not a product manager and does not want to become a product manager, I could see only one or two hands, and one of the hands was mine, and because I'm a designer. Right? And I think it's very rare occasions that a designer gets to speak to product managers. So when Ravi asked me, I couldn't say no. We've been collaborators, and of course, great to see in audience. And of course, one of my mentors, Ram, he was the keynote. So very, very glad to be here and glad to be in such an audience. And so Ravi said that the offshoot for this talk really was that what happened at a NASSCOM Product Conclave when Nishad said that one of the line was that a product manager also needs to have a heart for design. So I started really thinking about that, in my course of time, and Shekhar introduced that I worked for Human Factors International, actually for 10 years. And that is a UX consulting company, one of the largest UX consulting companies in the world. And worked with various stakeholders. And I was trying to look at, what worked, in what configurations, in collaborations, what really worked, and what is that I can bring in and share with you today, which can really help you as product managers. So that is really what it is about. And talking about having a heart of a designer is not that you're going to have a heart transplant, but really thinking about how many steps you can take so that you can actually have the proper conversation with design. So to really get started, I just want to kind of quote from Marty Kagan's book, and I completely agree. I think designers spend, and my lot, right, spend too much time talking to the designers, right? They preach to the choir, they go to design schools, and just yesterday I was in my alma mater and talking to the students. They just talk too much to other designers. And one of the things that he says specifically, and completely agree, that the value of design or thinking about design also needs to happen specifically to the audience, which is product managers, which rightly mentioned in the previous session, right? They are the orchestrators. If they are the orchestrators, they really need to deeply understand about this topic so that when the right time comes, they can give the right time to the designer to do what they need to do. Or if the designer is not there, they can take the right decisions to get stuff done, what really needs to get done. And so this is the reason I think when the opportunity was to speak to product managers, I just couldn't resist. So I think all of us are familiar with this chart, right? That when a good product happens, it is happening because of three-legged stool, right? You guys, product managers, are really good in understanding business viability aspect of it, looking at business models, supply chains, looking at market, go-to-market, how big is your market, all that stuff, right? And the engineers are really good at making things and looking at whether it can be made. Designers, on the other hand, are really looking at all the other aspects of bringing user advocacy, understanding aspect of aesthetic design, understanding aspect of the mental models of the user and translating into a compelling a stream flow or product experience, especially user experience. The key part in this is if you see that areas overlap. And the thing that I was saying initially that I was just reflecting back on the products that I was involved in and which projects actually were really successful. A couple of projects which really came to my mind was one of the projects that I was involved in, and this is way back in 2005, before even an iPad came out. One of our clients was Intel at HFI, and there was a very, very impressive product manager. He was more of a business guy, but his title wasn't a product manager. And there was a very, very sort of talented technology guy heading that thing, and we came to the picture. And the brief which was there for us is that design something which is somewhere in the middle between a cell phone and a laptop, right? And can be offered in the education space. Okay? They didn't know the answer in 2005, but of course now if we say the answer, all know the answer, right? iPad is a perfect thing to fit in out there. But that was the question which was asked. And we went ahead and did deep market research, not just market research, but deep design research. Design research is different than market research, and I'll make a case about that. Right? And it was wonderful how each one of us walked a bit to each side, right? Like, it was very clear a clamshell model is not going to work because, when the students are sitting in the class, when the clamshell is open, they will not have a direct contact with the teacher, and it's not going to work out. Right? They need to carry it in the school, they need to carry it back to the home. That means they should be able to, there should be a factor of mobility involved. That should, all the things involved in that. So everybody was making decisions and coming to the territory of each of the folks, and they were making a beautiful product. And the result of that was the Classmate PC, and 5 million of those products are being made. And that came to my mind because of the fact that I think each of the person, and product manager was a person, I think, willing to experiment. At the same time, they understood the ethos of our design process. And I'll talk a bit about the design process. So, I talked about design, that in what situation design really worked and product came out really well. It is a result of a design thinking, right? And it comes with a mindset in the organization or in a project team. If there is a design thinking mindset in a product team, a lot of things happen. And it happens when design is set up in the right way. Because I'll tell you very frankly, just by hiring a designer or going to a design school, getting an intern, or just getting one designer on board, you will not get your good designs. Because all of you understand the project situations are extremely political. And in a political situation, when somebody has a very strong idea, they can push forward the idea and they will ask the designers to make exactly what they want, right? And when that happens, that means the designer is not able to do their job, product manager is not able to do their job, and multiple things happen too. Before that anything happens, you need to create a structure around which design thinking can happen. And this is not just getting a designer, but even for a product manager to do a good job, they need to have all of these things, right? So there are different pillars to this. A process. There has to be a understanding of a design process in an organization so that it is followed consistently, repeatedly with the desired result. There has to be a way of having a culture in the organization which is design culture. I'll talk about this a bit more. People, in terms of how you hire, what kind of people you are hiring, what designers you are hiring. If you are trying to build a team, are you starting with a junior person, or are you getting a very senior person which is going to help you set up these processes, and then they start hiring folks, right? And looking at the structure part of it, how a designer in the organization is actually going to grow and start collaborating with people, what roles, where is design going to report into? Are they going to report into product management, or are they going to report into engineering, or they will have a separate function? Are they going to be a horizontal organization which is going to give a resource to each project all the time and they come in and out? Perhaps not. Because the 3-circle diagram that we looked at, every person has to have an equal responsibility. And I completely agree with the panelists that, that as a product manager, if you are sort of taking a lot of other calls on design and other places, sometimes a designer also takes product management calls. Right? In that scenario, all of this has to be right and planning comes to picture. So I really like this model, and I think you can remove the word design and put product management into it, it will still work. But for design to have any growth path in the organization, whether or not you have designers or not, this structure needs to be in place. And from a cultural perspective, there are a few things that you may think design means that somebody's going to be wearing nice red shoes and long hair and stuff. That's not the thing. Designers help to visually express what is happening in a lot of stakeholders' mind, people's mind, users' mind. So first of all, as a culture, you should work out loud. Work out loud, show the stuff that you're doing. If the latest iteration which is happening on design, put all the screens together. I'll tell you very frankly, there will be conversation which will spark off, which will not be happening if everything is residing in different hard disks. I'll share you one story from my design school which really helped, right? So I did my master's in product design from Ahmedabad, NIT Ahmedabad, and it was an extremely open culture. Everything was put visually. Everything that we'll do through the day, everything will go on softboards. And the path to the product design studio was the textile design studio. And having an engineering background previously, I had absolutely no clue about textile design. Absolutely no clue. Like, there's something called weaving, or there's something called block printing, or whatever that stuff is. But I go and I'll be fascinated by the pictures that these folks have put up. And I'll go and ask, what is happening out there? Oh, this is we are having a batik course or a screen printing class, and I'll get intrigued and I'll ask more questions, and at the end of the day, there will be fascinating collaborations happening because of that. Because of that, I think you will be sometimes influencing an engineer who will be so fascinated by looking at what is happening that maybe future paths for them could be a product management or design. So work out loud. That's one of the key things that I would like to say. The other part is that agree on certain user experience design principles throughout your organization. Okay, just like companies spend a whole lot of money and time going to offsites and doing all these mission statement and all those kind of different things. Agree on your user experience design principles. These are principles from Flipboard. How many of you are using Flipboard? Multiple of you. Right? And if you have an iPad, one of the first application you're going to be download is Flipboard. Look at these, just 3 simple UX principles: being fast, being beautiful, and being social is minimum that they are looking at. And then whenever conversations happen of adding a feature or designing something new, they go back and validate with these UX principles, and that becomes an ethos around which the conversations happen in that organization. So look at UX principles. So this is all a part of your infrastructure that you're building around, as I was saying, that as a process, as planning, and as people. And then key part is that you don't have to be a designer to do to be good at design thinking. And the folks that I've seen brilliant people who have great design thinking, who don't have any sort of design qualification. I'll give you a case in point. So just the project that I was talking about, which was the Intel Classmate PC, one of the very interesting findings that came out when we were talking to the users was the fact that, especially students, and I think all of you will recollect from your school time, right? When you say don't attend a class on one of the days, right? You go back home, and the first thing that you do is you actually talk to a friend of yours that, I missed a class. Can you share with me the chemistry notes? And the guy whom you have asked is the guy who sits on the front bench, right? Extremely reluctant to give his notebooks to you. Okay? So he will, say, oh, I can't find it, or I found it, or the fact that he's got this fear that, I won't get it back in time, and the other guy is going to have some competitive advantage. But still, there are friends, people who share the stuff and then give it to you. It gets copied, and you get it back. So that fear remains. Now imagine if there is a device which people are carrying, all these notes are getting shared, and at that time, of course, iPad wasn't there. So we conceptualized, just like being, sometimes we think we are naive designers, so we'll think of some really out-of-the-box solutions. So we thought that what if the user or a student who writes with a pencil and they got some device at the end of the pen, and it captures everything that they're writing in some kind of a soft form, and every subject can contain all those small blocks that, or maybe some USB sticks that we put at the end of pencil. And then, when a student misses the class, they just ask for chemistry and they get chemistry notes in form of this, right? And they sync it with some kind of device, and all the notes are. So we presented this, and the business guy I was talking to, he said, this is brilliant. This is awesome. Can we do this thing? Technology guy said, I'm not sure about it, but if we use something like an infrared reader, it is possible. Right? Let me figure it out. First thing first, I was so encouraged. I thought, we should not be even presenting this design as an option on the table, because it was so, looking so out of the box. But I was so encouraged to look at that these folks were so open, and they started looking at other use cases that I had not even thought about. This I said, oh wow, if this is the case, then imagine if there is just one single, but we have folders in it. So different options started emerging. And can you imagine, within 3 months of time, they actually built that stuff. So they built a pen. When you start writing, you have physical copy of the note, and it automatically captures the soft copy in form of some kind of digital content, and you synchronize, all your notes are there. And they built it. And that was a magical moment for me. And what happened there was that the other folks actually had design thinking. They were able to expand the horizons, not just what I was bringing to the table, but looking at different lenses. And that's when the magic happens. And just to quote from one of the gurus that I really like to follow, and I would strongly recommend you to read about Tim Brown. He was heading at one point in time IDEO, which is one of the most known product innovation companies. Right? So how many of you heard of IDEO? Quite a few. So And the folks who have not heard, so IDEO was the company which thought of these squishy handles on your toothbrush for children, right? And nice and big ones. And then they also thought of the first mouse for Apple. So multiple things that IDEO has thought about. Now IDEO also helps with service innovation and multiple other things. And this is what Tim Brown says about design thinking. Thinking like a designer can transform the way you develop products, services, processes, and even strategy. And it comes with the aspect of or divergence and a convergence thinking, and looking at synthesis analysis all the time. And there's a paper that Tim Brown has written in HBR and Harvard Business Review. It's a freely available paper. Just go to, I think, Design Thinking website. You'll find a whole lot of details. He talks about multiple aspects of design thinking, about iterative process and other stuff. And it is extremely inspiring to read how he thinks about it. And he shares multiple case studies. Okay. Unfortunately, while we have been talking about design thinking and other stuff, how design is perceived outside of the discipline of design is this. Is that we assume that design is decoration, but design is much more. Yeah, you have a question?
So can you define what is design thinking?
Okay.
How do you go about?
Okay. So first thing first, Tim Brown talks about a process of design, which is convergent and a divergent and a convergent process. Then he talks about the things that you need to set. Like for example, failing fast in the iterative process. It talks about absolutely hiring the right people. It talks about thinking about low-cost prototyping. Low-cost prototyping is, I think one of the questions which was asked earlier was that in the digital design domain, how do you do testing with your users who are outside? There are very easy way to do that. Like you can create so fast, and Tim Brown gives an example. So they were having this kind of a conversation in a room about designing the next one of the medical products, right? And they were all thinking about how big it should be, what should be the form factor of it. In the meantime, one of the engineers actually used the whiteboard marker, and he got another piece of equipment, duct tape. He said, "Does it look like this?" Yeah, it should be like this, but a little smaller. Iteration immediately happened. So prototyping and iteration is one of the key aspects of design thinking. And the other part is about thinking about what level the design people who are in your organization who have design thinking, how do you want to motivate them and engage them? Because the reality will exist that there will be some roadmap project which needs to be delivered tomorrow, and there will be aspect which needs to be vision and thinking about the future. You need to engage at both levels, and only then your design thinkers and design thinking will be successful. So it is about iterative design, it is about being open, and it is about being thinking visual, and it is being about problem solving through a convergent and divergent process. So, as I said, currently the way design is perceived is that if you get your mock-up right, your design is done, right? There's a big perception that, we have created a product roadmap, let's get a designer in now. Okay, we have all this conversation, let's get the designer in now. And you know what? And the conversation will be, boss, 2 दिन के बाद में we need to get some funding and mock-up banana hai, and a very nice compelling pitch will be given, and the guy does overnighter, and some kind of a visual design is created, and then you realize that the number of iterations that happens later on after that are immense, because the design thinking and the designer has not been a part of the conversation to kind of take that part, or the amount of iterations that had to be happened from a design perspective have not happened earlier. So the first thing that you feel is the visual design, but to get a good design, multiple other things need to happen. The UX strategy has to be extremely clear. The UX strategy is all about who are your users, what are their needs, what is the UX ecosystem that we're talking about. So there is a product ecosystem, but there's also UX ecosystem. UX ecosystem is all about who are your primary users, who are the secondary users, which environment do they work in, right? Environment is going to define such a big aspect. And just to give you a case in point, we were working with a large bank in my previous company, and we did their login section of the site. And they, one very brilliant guy came to us, he said, "We got an idea, and will you guys help us out?" I asked, "What's the idea?" He said, "You know what, in the bank branches, the queues are getting longer. So what we are thinking is that the site that you've just designed, what if it is available in kiosk and you put it in the corner, and can you help us kind of modify what you have done?" So my first thing was that it will not work. I said, "Why?" I said, "Environment is different. When you are doing banking from home, you are feeling very secure, right? Or you are at your office, just you're feeling very secure. But in a bank branch, first of all, trust and privacy issues will come into the picture. You would not want to kind of put in your password in public. And first of all, you're already in the branch. Why would you like to check your bank balance there? Right? So environment comes into picture, and that is a very specific aspect of the UX strategy part of it. So getting your, knowing who your users are, where they are located, who else they are kind of talking to, is all a part of your UX strategy. And then based upon your understanding user needs, motivations, comes the aspect of creating navigation and structure and what is called as information architecture. And I can tell you very frankly that it is amazing to see how much people don't get navigation at all. And in my 10 years of experience, I've seen even very, very seasoned people not getting navigation and structure right. They jump on a detailed design solution. Let me just create a quick workflow. Let me create a quick mock. Let's see how the flow is going to be. But the navigation and structure is not worked out. At the end of the day, if your navigation is not right, your 80% of the UX goes wrong. How much ever beautiful your design is. And navigation structure is about, so user has a certain mental model and a certain schema in the mind, the way they look at this specific area that you are designing for. And that has to be revealed by talking to the users. And your navigation structure has to be mapped to their schema. If it doesn't, then there is a gap. And that has to be figured out. So navigation and structure is extremely critical, and then comes aspect of your looking at detailed interaction and the kind of widgets and the kind of flows that you're looking at. And then comes aspect of content. I'm not saying that content is not equally important. In some of the cases, content may be even much more important than interaction. But navigation and structure is fundamentally extremely, extremely important. And visual design is also presentation, so it is one of the layers. But problem is that people just look at that visual design, but it is made up of many more things. To get it all right, there's a design process. Right? There are many flavors of design process. This is one of the flavors of design. This is the one that IDEO encourages. Right? You can see how the chart sort of goes like this and like this. This is where they are trying to talk about that. This is where the convergence is happening, and there are places where a divergence is happening. So there is a part which is understand, observe. This is where you are understanding your users. And there is a part when you are synthesizing. This is when you are compiling all the stuff that you have gained. And then you are ideating. This is where a little bit of divergence is happening. And then you again start sort of converging to your prototyping. And when you are iterating again, you are a bit of divergence. Okay? So this is what it is. How many of you are sort of using this design process in your organization? 3, 4. I think the show of hands shows really well that how we are doing as product organization, right? And that is very true. Very few companies actually follow the complete design process, right? Even in the companies which have big design teams, they will circumvent the design process at the drop of the hat, right? You give them anything, because the release is coming, because the exec is coming, or because there is the product roadshow about to happen, or the fact that the competitor is going to release something. At the drop of the hat, the first thing that gets circumvented is the design process. Okay. Not to say that that you have to use it to the T, but the fact is that there are different aspects of lean design process that you can still use. There are different ways that you can still what is called as UX on steroids. You can still do that and get some feedback rather than getting no feedback at all. So what happens really is that companies, whether it is a startup or a big organization, they end up focusing a lot from a design perspective on ideating, prototyping, and iterating, right? And all in closed doors, intense conversations, product guy having his point of view, design guy having his point of view. Nobody's clear about what user wants, but there are assumptions on the table, and having something put out there, okay, let's figure it out when we get user feedback after the launch. Right? This is what happens. And most of the time, we are not doing user-centered design process, we are doing stakeholder-driven design process. Stakeholders are the product guys, the technology guys, and the business guys in this. And I think user-centered design is equally about stakeholder as well as user-centered design. So this is the part that has to be looked at. And this is the part which is hardly being done, especially in Indian product companies. I can be very, very frank about it. Right? How often does this happen? All the time. But there is a silver lining. There are companies which have deep design ethos and they are doing actually pretty well. Right? There are companies like Pinterest, Airbnb. Airbnb is a beautiful, fantastic example of how design ethos is being brought in, and they're actually changing the whole facet of how hotel is being even conceived. Right? And then Path, of course, Twitter. So the question really is that now as a product manager, what can you do to have a heart of a designer? I think the first thing first is that start with this. Have a deep empathy towards your user, and if I can be a little controversial, I think customer is a word which has been used quite often. Understand your users as people first and customer second, but your users, whether it's an enterprise user is using a Facebook in the evening and he's getting exposed to a certain user experience, right? And if you go back and give him a PeopleSoft or SAP experience, it's really not going to work, right? Not anymore, not in this day and age. So you need to think about that. There is no real substitute for deep user research, right? And underlining the fact that just Googling and doing a competitive analysis is not going to be enough. And of course, not every product should end up looking like Pinterest. As a designer, it aches me when I see new startups coming in and everybody ends up looking like Pinterest because it seems to be the order of the day. But the fact is that their navigation and structure is going to be working for their specific target users. But your target users and your ecosystem may be different. So think about what is your ecosystem. And think about when you talk to the users, what are you actually learning about? How many of you know deja vu? What is deja vu?
Seeing things again. Seeing things again.
Seeing things again, or having a feeling that you've been there before, right? So this is, I was in a situation like this. So we were actually working with my MIT Media Lab, designing something for the self-help groups, a device which will help them keep their accounts. And this is a paper prototype that I'm carrying in a village near Aurangabad. And the first thing that surprised me was that, first of all, I went with this thing, these people are really not going to understand what I'm carrying. So the first thing that she asked me is that, you have 3 columns, but our register has 4 columns, right, in which we make the entry. And the 4th column is about the representative who is coming in place of the women, because most of the women do not get a chance to do that. How have you accommodated that in your design? So the key part is that, deja vu is about that you feel that you've been in the situation before. But what I request you, and this is a plea as a designer and as a person who have talked to a lot of users, is that bring in Vuja De. Vuja De is a new hat that you have to wear, that when you meet a customer, think of that you have not been in this situation before, and you're looking at this instance for the very first time. Think about the first time you traveled to a new country and imagine the signages that you looked at and how the door opened and how things happened, because you were looking at absolutely from a fresh pair of eyes. And when you talk to the users and you feel that you have known these guys, known this user group, known this customer segment over and over again because you've worked in this area, you'll be surprised when you wear a Vuja De hat. So wear a Vuja De hat and you'll be surprised. And you'll be sharing those insights big time with other folks. Okay, so really it boils down to, I think everybody's talked about it, is absolutely critical to have a clarity on who your users are and whom you're going to be focusing on. And this is really the business aspect. And this will directly affect your design thinking as well, because if you're designing for expert users, the way the design is going to be different and the way the novice user is going to be different. And then look at what differentiates the target users. Okay, let me actually quickly go. Just one thing I'd like to emphasize is that when you have a design on hand, you need to make sure that just like you remove your coding bugs, you remove your usability bugs in the process. So usability bugs are the labeling issues, the presentation issues, the issues where the color and other things are there, and that happens through rapid usability testing. So do that, and let me actually jump that. And that needs to be done because what users say versus what users do are different. Users are rational as well as emotional. A traffic light is designed for a rational design, right? You're not supposed to cross it, but users don't follow that. Okay, so you need to go and test your designs and see what is really working. And a couple of techniques I'm going to talk about, not detailed, but which is going to be critical for your, specifically in product companies, is formative testing, and focus on that. Formative testing is all about the fact that when you are still in ability to change the design. So formative usability testing is the gorilla usability testing, or UX on steroids, is that Monday you start your design and you have not coded anything in that. It could be just paper prototypes. You recruit maybe 3 to 4 users from your target user groups, get them into a conference room, don't require a usability lab, look at what they are saying. At the end of the day, go and iterate the design. Next day, get another 3 or 4 set of users, and by the end of the week, you have an iterated design, and nothing that you have spent any more than what you would do in the next 2 months if you have not taken that as a part of the exercise. On the other hand, summative testing is all about whether you have met your design criteria, and it's really not going to help because you can't change your design at all. So, what is really the preferred method out of these two? It has to be qualitative. So, key part, test, iterate, and it is really not going to take more time. Formative testing, if you want to just carry one word with you, get the formative testing as a part of your design influence and make sure that is done as part of the organization. Okay, let me actually skip this part. There are other aspects of user feedback. Surveys is another one. Ram talked about customer satisfaction surveys. Problem with surveys are they are very, very preference-oriented mechanism. It is not giving you about user performance. So many times, any feedback that you're looking at focus on user performance as well as user feedback. And in surveys, many times people don't understand it's a quantitative measure. So make sure that your sampling is absolutely correct. And just before the launch, if you are looking at from a point of a designer, A/B testing is absolutely imperative. Whether you are a product guy, engineering guy, or looking at it from a design perspective, if you're not sure about something, don't do the entire launch, get at least 2-3 designs in place. And if you are doing all your metrics, remember the matrix is going to tell you one side of the story, what is not working, but to get to understand why it is not working, you have to have some sort of a qualitative feedback. So just to sum up, to get to a good design, product and user experience design have to work perfectly well. And if the product designer already has a heart of a designer, whether or not you have the designer, you will find a way to create a culture in the organization, to create a structure in the organization so that design can be successful. And at the end of the day, you are coming up with a very compelling product. So, just last thing, that if you increase your number of touch points with the user, getting the feedback and iterating, the chance of a product being successful is very high. And this is shown through studies. And finally, do not aim for an MVP. Aim for an MVP, which is a minimal desirable product, and see how changes happen. It's a little bit further to go, but it is going to make a whole lot of difference. Okay. With that, thank you.
We'll just take one question and wrap it up. Yeah, please go.
So I mean, it's quite clear that design is not something that should be rushed into. But fact is, on many occasions, that is more or less what happens. So are there any tips or any suggestions that you can share? Like, if you're under a very, very tight constraint, like an executive or someone is going to see the first prototype the next day, what are some of the things that you could probably do to make sure that something that what you're going to show doesn't end up like a really horrible experience?
Okay. So the question really is that there's a clarity that design should take time, what it requires, but there are practical situations in which it has to be rushed in some ways, right? That's what you're asking. So I think one thing that I talked about I talked about the design infrastructure, about process and other things, and there was UX principles. Along with UX principles, there are UX patterns that come into picture, right? So there will be a bunch load of best practices that you as an organization can create, saying that for every user task, that if it's a, say, a order flow, or if it is a search and list kind of a page, or if it is, say, a report creation page, or perhaps it's the product page. These are my best practices, what I've gained from over a period of time. You must have done a bunch of testing, and then you have maybe UX patterns for it. You can leverage best of those patterns and then use it. At least you're not coming and starting from scratch. The other part is that I think even if you have 5 days or 4 days, I think it does not really harm to do guerrilla UX tactics. You know who your target users are. You know that you have to remove usability bugs. You can just do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people feedback sessions, and it will be extremely helpful.
Right, thank you. Well, let's break for lunch. It's going to be a for lunch. So let's break for lunch now. Thank you, Sarit. Have a small souvenir from.
Thanks, Sarit, for the wonderful talk and introducing the dimension of design, much needed for all of us here.
Thank you.